Well, today we are in part 2 of our message series, No Worries, and we're trying to figure out what do you do in life when there's not much that you can do in life. For most of us, our default answer is, well, that's easy. I worry when there's not much I can do. Well, we're looking at some events from the life of Jesus that teach us how to deal with the worry that so many of us struggle with in our lives. Today, we're dealing with a very specific type of worry that arises from a very specific season in our lives. And we're going to look specifically at the worry that comes up when there's not much you can do except sit there and wait. Just want to get you feeling it this morning. We're going to wait today. All of us know what it feels like to have to sit and wait in a waiting room, whether it's for a mechanic or a dentist or a doctor. Most waiting rooms feel pretty similar. There's the tile floor, the fluorescent lights, the fake plants, the daytime television, the uncomfortable chairs, the outdated magazines, the children who are making a lot of noise. And everybody loves happy, noisy children, but children who are destroying property while their parents are texting, not as much fun to be in the waiting room with them. But all of us feel the frustration of being stuck in a waiting room, hoping, maybe my name will get called next, although after they call your name, a big bill comes, so that's not pleasant, but at least you're free. All of us know what it feels like to be in that short-term prison sentence of a waiting room. Well, something that we also all are familiar with is what it feels like when your life feels stuck in the waiting room. Okay, either you have been and you know you will be, or you are right now in a season of life. Maybe it's with your career, for example, where you feel all you can do is wait. Maybe you graduated from college and you thought your career would begin, but you haven't landed a career job yet and you're wondering, waiting, applying, wondering, waiting, applying, but there's not much you can do except wait for the right position to open up. Or maybe you're in a career transition where you left one career job, but the next career job has not yet begun, and you feel like you're stuck waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for that right position to open up. Or maybe you feel like you're stuck in a waiting room in terms of relationship world. Maybe you're single and all your friends are getting married and you're waiting, when am I going to get married? When am I going to meet the right one? Or maybe all your friends are getting pregnant, but you're not able to get pregnant and you're wondering, well, when are we going to get pregnant? I feel stuck. Or maybe you're waiting for your kids to sleep through the night, or to get out of diapers, or to get off to school, or to leave home, or at least call your mother after you leave home on the weekend. Is that too much to ask for you to call your mother and you're waiting? So you're in a season of life when it comes to relationships. Maybe your waiting room actually has to do with waiting rooms where there's been a lot going on with you medically and they're running a lot of tests, and maybe they're not quite sure, or maybe they're sure, but the treatments are really slow to develop, and let's try this treatment and we'll see if it works, and you wait, and we'll try that treatment and see if it works, and you wait. Or maybe someone you love and care about is going through that and you're literally sitting in a lot of waiting rooms. But all of us know what it feels like to be stuck waiting, and there's not much you can do except wait through these waiting room seasons of life. Now, I don't know about you, but I have the hardest time when it comes to waiting and waiting and waiting. Part of the reason, I think, is because it feels so purposeless to be stuck waiting when there's nothing you can do. I mean, other careers are going forward, other relationships are going forward, other lives are going forward, but yours, it isn't going forward. No good is coming out of it. There's no purpose to it. Part of the reason why we hate waiting so much, honestly, has to do with our American culture, because as a culture, we are driven to the place where we are terrible at waiting. I found a quote that I think captures the spirit of our age so well. It's from a woman named Elizabeth Latch Quinn. She's on staff at Syracuse University. Her father is a very famous philosopher, Christopher Latch. But anyway, here's what she said to capture the spirit of our age. She said, in our culture, we are taught that everything that is not us is there to be manipulated by us for our own ends. Now, this impacts you and I more than you and I are even aware of, but we're taught in America to look at our world and say, this device is there for my ends, these dollars are there for my ends, this job is there for my ends, these people are there for my ends. There's something in our culture that drives us towards that. But when you're stuck in a season where all you can do is wait, and you've tried to manipulate the situation or turn the dials and work things out to your advantage, and it's not working out to your advantage, that goes against everything we've been taught in our culture, and we feel stuck. And that leads us to another reason why I think we hate waiting so much, and that is it only confirms what we're afraid of, and that is that we are not in control of the outcomes of our life. Okay, we can try and manipulate and guide and steer and think ahead and plan ahead, but when you get to a season where you're just stuck and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, it confirms that you and I do not have full control of the outcomes of what happens in our lives. Now, for some of you, this is exactly the reason why you lost your faith. Or this is the reason for some of you why you walked away from church, because it's not too big of a step to say, if I can't control the outcomes, maybe God can't control the outcomes either. Because if God was paying attention, I wouldn't be sitting here waiting. If God was paying attention, if God knew, if God cared, God would do something about the reality that this is purposeless, it's meaningless, nothing's happening, nothing's developing, nothing is going forward. And for many people, this waiting room season of life causes us to lose faith in God. But here's what's interesting. When you open the Bible and discover what the Bible has to say about these seasons of life of waiting, and it actually says quite a bit because this is something that is common to the human experience. What it teaches us about waiting is something that on the surface can be frustrating, because to summarize everything it teaches, it says this: God's sense of timing seldom aligns with ours. Now, you already know, you've had enough cross-cultural experiences to understand that timing is relative. What it means to be on time is a very relative concept. Imagine a wedding where you've got a bride from one culture and a groom from another culture. The groom's from a culture where being 30 minutes late is considered right on time. And the bride is from a culture where if you're not there 5 minutes early, you're late. One of those kind of families or cultures. And she and all her bridesmaids are lined up and ready to go, and the wedding's ready to begin, and now it's 15 minutes past the hour, and the groom hasn't even shown up yet. And on one side of the church, you've got hand-wringing and anxious looks and whispers and a lot of nerves. On the other side, well, they haven't shown up yet. They're still rolling in, and they're happy, and everything's fine. But timing is relative. What it means to be on time is relative. You've got a sense of what it means to be on time. Your cable company has a sense of what it means to be on time. Don't sync up. You have a sense of on time. Airlines have a sense of on time. Don't always sync up, right? The point is, timing, on time, is relative. And as much as we don't like it, our sense of what it means to be on time for God does not always align. In fact, I think it seldom aligns with what God thinks is on time. And God's sense of timing will continually confound our sense of timing. No matter what culture we're from, His grace rarely operates on our time schedules and our requests. But rather than let this reality be a frustration for us, today we're going to discover two particular things that Jesus does when He asks us to sit in the waiting room. There are two particular things He is up to when you are in a season of life where there is nothing you can do but wait. And we're going to see it in the lives of two different people that Jesus encountered. And we meet them in Mark's biography of the life of Jesus. Last week we began this series looking at Mark's story of the life of Jesus in chapter 4 where he calmed the storm. Today we're going to be in chapter 5 of his story of the life of Jesus, where we discover the two critical things Jesus is doing when you are stuck in the waiting room, waiting for God to show up, waiting to intervene. And before we look at it, I have one last thing to say. For those of you who right now today are listening and you're saying, how did he know? I'm in the waiting room right now. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know what I would be thinking if I were seated in your chair this morning. I would be thinking, he better not say some patronizing thing about being patient and waiting for God's perfect timing and just trust God and everything will be fine. Because when you're in the waiting room, that's not what you want to hear, is it? What you want to hear when you're in the waiting room is when your name gets called. That's what you want to hear. What you want to hear is the telephone ringing. What you want to hear is the good news. What you want to hear is the accurate diagnosis. What you want to hear is that you're pregnant. What you want to hear is that they want to hire you. What you want to hear is that you are going to be released from your waiting room and life is moving forward, but you do not want to hear anything about how wonderful it is to wait and trust in God. Or maybe you're nicer people than I am. That's not what I would want to hear from the preacher this morning. That's why I'm so excited to see what Jesus taught and what Jesus did for people who are stuck in the waiting room of life. So today we're in Mark chapter 5. We're going to jump right in verse 21 of the story. It says, "When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake." So last week he was on one side of the lake, the Sea of Galilee, went over to the other side, he did some stuff over there. Now he comes back over, and immediately a crowd just forms wherever Jesus is. It's like flash mob because they love his sermons, they love his miracles, they just want to be by Jesus. Continues. "Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, 'My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live.' So Jesus went with him." So we're introduced to this character, a guy by the name of Jairus. He's called a synagogue leader. What that means is this was a man of very high standing in their Jewish community. First of all, he was a very moral, religious, and upright man. He had excellent character. People would have admired him. They would have had confidence enough in him to say, "Hey, you can lead our local church in our area because you're a man with such integrity. You're a man who always treats people so fairly. We're going to instill that trust in you." And we know from ancient times that synagogue rulers were people who generally gave a lot of money to the synagogue. They were pretty wealthy. They did all right for themselves. So we don't know about Jairus, but we can guess maybe a small business owner doing pretty well financially, a good man, kind of guy you'd love to have as a friend or a neighbor or someone in your community, just that kind of guy. And he comes up to Jesus, and there's this crowd, and he cuts through the crowd, and he just, boom, hits the deck, falls before Jesus, and he tells her, "I need your help." What we derive from the language isn't that his girl is sick and she needs a healing. What we derive from what he said is that she's about to die. The doctors can't help her. Unless you show up and do a miracle, my little girl isn't going to make it. Will you come and do something, Jesus? Will you come and do something? Now, the interesting thing about Jesus, as you read the biographies of his life, he never once turned down a request for help. Anybody who came to Jesus and asked for help, he said, "All right, I'll help you." So he said, "Come to my house and heal my daughter." Jesus said, "All right, well, let's go. Let's help your little girl." And he starts going. Now, imagine Jairus, a dad who loves his little girl. She's dying. He's heartbroken. He does everything he can, like any dad in the room would do. I know that, to save his daughter. Nothing's working. He hopes beyond hope Jesus can help. And Jesus says, "All right, let's go." So now he has a little bit of hope. He has a little bit of excitement. Let's get there. Let's get help for my daughter. I'll lead the way. And we can imagine Jairus just like grabbing him and starting to run through the crowd to get him back home. Well, here's what happens in the story. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. So this crowd said, "Hey, cool, miracle, get your popcorn, let's go." And the whole mass, the whole mob, we don't know how many people there were, seems like hundreds if they're all pressed together and they're all going to somebody's house. Hope you made a lot of chili. It's just crowded and they all go along with them. It says, "And a woman was there," and this is the second character we're going to learn from today. "A woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. What we know about this woman is that it had something to do with her feminine parts, and she was subject to chronic bleeding, internal bleeding, and it was going on for 12 years, just an incredibly long disease to wrestle with. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse." So this is a woman for whom the treatments were making her worse than the original disease was. She went to doctor after doctor after doctor. No matter how they treated her, it got worse and worse and worse, and she spent everything she had trying to get cured, and nothing could cure this woman. She was just getting worse and worse as the treatments piled up. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, here's her line of thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." So she gets this idea if I can sneak up to him, touch him, he's the holy man, he's the one close to God, he's the one who does miracles, just touching him. I don't know what it's going to do. Maybe if I rub my rabbit's foot while I touch him, I'll just get healed, is kind of how she's thinking right here. Immediately, her bleeding stopped. And she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. You know how when something's not right, when you're sick, you just know, deep in your bones, you somehow know even before you have a symptom, or if you're better, you just know. She just knew instantly, I can't believe it, it worked. I'm better. Here's what happened. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. So the disciples said, "Jesus, who touched you?" Who didn't touch you? It's kind of like a crowd in here, and that guy, and that guy, and that lady, and that kid, and that girl, and that guy. They all touched you in the last 2 seconds based on what I can see, Jesus. So the crowd was that big. There's all those people crowding around. All of a sudden, as all these people are walking shoulder to shoulder, touching each other, Jesus just stops. "Stop the ambulance. Someone touched me." I think, what kind of prima donna is this guy? He's like, "Oh, no touching, Jesus, no touching." But he says, "No, someone touched me." And he stops the whole entourage because he has to find out who was it that touched me. Now, imagine you're Jairus. Help is coming from my little girl. Jesus is coming. It's all going to be okay, maybe. And all of a sudden, "I'm sorry, excuse me, Jairus, someone touched me." What are you doing? Come on, we got to help my daughter. But here's what happens. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. She's trembling with fear because this was completely inappropriate. For a woman to touch a male rabbi in the first century Jewish world, for an unclean woman, ceremonially unclean because of her blood flow, to touch a rabbi and make him unclean, absolutely taboo, broke so many cultural barriers here. She was afraid. She knew she shouldn't have done it. She probably just should have asked him, but she did that anyway, and she was healed. So she falls before him, trembling with fear, realizing that she's not going to get away from him and hide. And she told him the whole truth, and he said to her, "Daughter," to a woman who's probably older than him, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering." Say, wow, how compassionate, how gracious, how tender, how completely irresponsible. Jesus, did you not notice there's a little girl who's about to die? And you stopped the ambulance to have a conversation with this woman? That this would be like an ambulance stopping on the way to help a heart attack victim to help bind up a broken arm and then have a conversation to make sure everything was cool afterwards while someone's having a heart attack somewhere else. See, this isn't just irresponsible. This is something worse. This is malpractice. If these two people were in an ER today in the United States, any doctor who saw the woman with the chronic condition first and took the time to have a conversation with her while making the girl and her father with the acute condition who's about to die sit in the waiting room and wait would get his pantsuit off, is what would happen in our society today. This is absolutely malpractice that the great physician is committing here. What is Jesus thinking that he doesn't just, okay, fine, she's healed. I mean, he's the Son of God. He knows what's going on. But on we go to Jairus' house. He insists on stopping everything in order to have a conversation with this woman, to tell her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Be healed, go in peace," and all that stuff. Now, Jairus must be losing his mind over here. Saying, "Come on, hurry, Jesus, hurry, hurry, Jesus, hurry, come on." But Jesus will not be hurried. Whatever he's doing here is so important to him that he is willing to risk the life of this little girl in order to have this conversation with this woman. He will not be hurried. He will not be rushed. And while he's having the conversation with this woman, the worst case scenario unfolds for Jairus. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" And I have to imagine they said this with sarcasm. They said this with a sneer. Apparently, he's too important to be bothered by the dying girl. So let's not bother him. He's too important for this. He's got to have this conversation. It's too late. Your daughter is dead. Now again, we can't imagine what Jairus is feeling right now, where he's done everything he can to save his little girl. He goes, hopes beyond hope that there's one thing he can do, and he can talk to Jesus, and Jesus is finally coming. Maybe he can save my little girl, but he stops, and now, because he stops, because the ambulance stops, he doesn't get there in time. And not only does his little girl die, but he wasn't there for her when she died. He wasn't there at her side when she passed. Because Jesus made him wait. Jesus, overhearing all of this, is going to say something important to Jairus. Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." In essence, Jesus is saying, "Jairus, I know I've left you sitting in the waiting room. I know that my delay seems unconscionable to you. I know there is no explanation for what I'm doing here. Jairus, I want you to wait a little longer, and I want you to trust me. Because for God, on time is relative. God operates on His own schedule, and His timing is almost never aligned with our sense of timing. And when Jesus looks at Jairus and He says, "Jairus, I want you to trust me while I have you wait a little while longer," He is in essence looking past Jairus and looking at you today, and He's saying, "Hey, remember how in Mark chapter 4, I showed you that my grace and my love are perfectly compatible with the reality that you're going to go through some storms in your life? Now I want you to understand that my grace and my love are perfectly compatible with the times and seasons in life where it seems like I am too late and I have left you waiting for too long, and I want you to trust me." Jesus is not saying, He is not saying, "I will not be hurried even though I love you." He's saying something bigger than that. He's saying, "I will not be hurried because I love you." And if you insist on hurrying Jesus, you are the one who is going to miss out on the opportunity to fully feel His love and His grace in your life, even though we're so impatient when He seems too late. But because of the delays of God, He uses them as an opportunity to teach us something that are worth almost any price to learn. Let's see what Jairus is going to learn. He did not let anyone follow Him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. So He stops the whole crowd. He says, "Okay, party's over. Everyone's dismissed. Peter, James, John, Jairus. Off we go." When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went into them and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him, and of course they did. What kind of fool would walk into a funeral and look at the corpse lying there and say, "Oh no, the person's not dead, they're just asleep"? It's as laughable as it is completely ignorant, and so of course they laugh at him for his comment. After He put them all out, He took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with Him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. At which in my notes this week I wrote, "Thank you, Captain Obvious." There's so much going on in this story. Honestly, we could spend 4 weeks just talking about Jairus and this woman and all of this, but for the balance of our time today, here's what I would like to do. I would like to focus very specifically on what we learn in this text when it comes to waiting for Jesus when he seems to be delaying way too long and when we've been waiting in the waiting room way too long. The first thing we see that leaps off the pages of the Bible at us when you're stuck in the waiting room is this. It's your first fill in the blank today. When you go to Jesus, as Jairus did, as this woman did, when you go to Jesus, he will ask for more than you planned on giving. He will ask for more than you planned on giving. That's what happens when you go to Jesus for help. Jairus went to Jesus and he asked him for a healing. He wanted to give Jesus just enough faith, just enough hope, just enough trust that he would make it to his home and that he would heal his little girl. That's what he wanted to give to Jesus. This woman wanted to give Jesus enough superstitious faith that if she could touch him and just that, she could be healed. She did not want to confront him. She did not want to ask him. She just wanted to touch and go. And I'm gone. I'm out of here. I got my healing. See ya. And she's gone. But Jesus is going to ask each of them for more than they were willing to give. For this woman, he asks her to go public with her faith. He asks her to be publicly recognized so he can have a conversation with her. Well, why does he want to have a conversation with her? Why does she ask her for more than she was willing to give? It's pretty simple. He wanted to take this superstitious faith that she had in Jesus and turn it into an eternal relationship with God. He wants her to know, no. This wasn't like some lucky thing. This wasn't some superstitious thing. Daughter, there's something you need to know that is more important than your healing, and that is that if you trust me, if your faith is in me, you can lead a life that is truly at peace, and you can die in peace and live in eternity in peace, knowing that I am your Savior. He wanted to give her something more than she planned on getting, but to do that, he had to ask for more than she was willing to give. But to do that, he had to ask Jairus, who was waiting there, for more than he was willing to give. He was willing to give enough trust and hope for Jesus to show up and heal his daughter, but he's going to ask Jairus for so much more as a result. He is going to ask him to trust Jesus even after his daughter had died. Now for us, we know that it is for Jesus no more effort to bring a little girl back from death than it is to cure her of a fever, but from where Jairus sat, he didn't know that. And he asks Jairus for more than what he was willing to give. Well, why did he do that? Because he wanted to give Jairus also something more than he planned on receiving. He planned on receiving a healing. What he got instead was way bigger than that. What he got instead was a resurrection. What he got instead was a demonstration of God's power that would forever in his future remove any doubt about who God is, who Jesus is, and his ability to come through. So although it is true that when you go to Jesus, he will ask for more than you are willing to give, here's the other thing that's true. When you go to Jesus, he will give more than you planned on receiving. The reason why he asks for more than you planned on giving is that he is ready to give more than you are planned on receiving. And he goes to incredible lengths to do this for these two people. He's so adamant about this. Look at what he does. Look at the juxtaposition we have in Mark's account between these two people. They could not be more different. On the one hand, you have Jairus, wealthy, upstanding citizen, good pillar of the community. On the other hand, you have this woman, penniless, sick and an outsider spiritually because she's ceremonially unclean. But if you look at the life of Jesus, what you see time and time again is that the contrasting people are always brought side by side in front of Jesus in the crowd. You always have the insider like Jairus and the outsider like this woman. You have the Pharisee and you have the tax collector. You have the good people and you have the sinners and prostitutes, always side by side. And every time Jesus is in a crowd and he encounters the two extremes, he is always attracted, always drawn towards the person who in the equation, like this woman, is the outsider, the person who is unclean, the person who is impure, the person who is unworthy of God. Why is Jesus constantly drawn towards the outsider in these situations? The answer is because that's the cross. That's the message of the cross. That's the message of Jesus. What is the message of the gospel? What is the message of Jesus? The way to exaltation is through humility. The way to power is through losing your power. The way up is down. The way to find yourself is to lose yourself. The way to gain your life is to lose your life. And whoever loses his life will gain eternal life. It is only through the humility and shame of the cross, which Jesus is looking at, that he will be exalted to the right hand of God. And it is only through the cross that we who are outsiders spiritually find acceptance and peace and grace with God through Jesus Christ. What this means is if you are an outsider, if you feel like an outsider when it comes to church, when it comes to God, because of your past, because of your present, because of your sin, because of what has made you unclean, you need to know this. Jesus is not scared of you. Jesus is drawn towards you because he came for the outsiders. He came to forgive sinners, and he came to help people like this woman who didn't even feel worthy to stand in front of the presence of a first century Jewish rabbi, but he made time for her and wanted her to know how much he loved her. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Is Jesus late in your life? It's not because he's punishing you. It's not because he's mad at you. It's not because he's getting you. But maybe it's because when you go to Jesus, he will ask you for more than you are willing to give, in order that he may give you more than you thought you would receive. Maybe God isn't practicing malpractice. Maybe there, like Jairus, is some crucial information that you didn't know about. And for those of you, again, who are in the season of waiting right now, I want to tread carefully here. I do not want to offend you, because if I sat down and listened to your story, I would probably agree with you, and I would say, yeah, I don't know why God isn't showing up, because it sure seems like God should be showing up. So I'm just going to judge myself right now, okay? Just talking about myself, when I've been in seasons of life where God is late, where I think God is late, where I think God is delaying, where I think I've been sitting in the waiting room too long, the reality is that I realize that my frustration with God is ultimately rooted in my own incredible arrogance. That I think I know what God should do and when God should do it. That I think I know what I should give to God. That I think I know what God should give to me better than God himself knows. That's just incredibly arrogant on my part to do that. But when we lose patience with God, I wonder if that's not going on in a lot of our lives. So the question is, okay, great, let's be patient, let's wait, because, maybe Jesus is asking for more than we planned on giving. Maybe he's giving more than we planned on receiving. But how do we find the patience to sit there a little while longer when our patience is already out? Well, I think we see two critical clues in this story that give us all the power and all the patience we'll need if we consider them carefully. The first one is this. Mark included a detail that is nowhere else mentioned in any of the Gospels of the life of Jesus. The detail he mentioned is that when this woman was healed, Jesus felt power go out of him. Which is kind of interesting, because last week we saw how Jesus quieted a storm. He rebuked it and told it to be still, and it didn't seem to be any strain on him whatsoever. He's walking through a crowd. This woman touches him from behind, and it's like, he feels power going out from him. Nowhere else in all of the Gospels of Jesus is this concept mentioned. But it's mentioned here. Why is that? Mark is trying to draw our attention to an important spiritual reality in the ministry and life of Jesus. Namely, that Jesus is willing to become weak in order to give you a healing. Jesus was willing to become weak in order to make you strong. In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes about how through the weakness of the cross, Christ gives us God's power and God's strength. Jesus was willing to become weak to make this woman strong, which is only a foreshadowing of what would ultimately happen on the cross. That Jesus was willing to become weak to the point of death on the cross in order to make you healed, strong, able to stand before God in righteousness. And when you see Jesus giving you that ultimate sacrifice of love, it gives you the ability to see that Jesus is trustworthy. The second thing we see is this. Did you at least think it odd when Jesus shows up at the funeral, hasn't even seen the girl yet, and said, "No, she's not dead, she's just sleeping"? And everyone laughed at him because they knew it wasn't true. Why would Jesus make this statement that the little girl is asleep, that she's not actually dead? He didn't say it for Lazarus or other people he raised from the dead. Why did he say this little girl is asleep? The answer has to do with that unique term that we found in the story. The words that we looked at were talitha koum, which means nothing to us. But what's interesting is Mark wanted the readers to know in Aramaic, these are the words Jesus said, and then he translated it into Greek, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And then, of course, when the English translators came along, they said, well, I guess we should say, he said talitha koum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. These words, though, are very interesting words that Jesus chose to use. And I'll be honest, I don't like the English translations here because, if you look in your program, there's that exclamation point where Jesus seems to be saying, little girl, I say to you, get up. That's not at all what Jesus is saying here. First of all, the word talitha, it was a diminutive term. It was the word for woman or the word for lady. And so literally, you would say little lady, is how it would say, but it was really a term of endearment that parents would use for their own kids. I think the best English translation that really captures the essence of this word in English, I think the best translation we have for this word is sweetheart. You sing to her, sweetie, sweetie pie, sweetheart. And koum is not the word which means be resurrected. It just means get up, wake up. What he's saying to her is, sweetheart, it's time to get up. Sweetheart, it's time to get out of bed. It's the exact same phrase that her own mom and dad would use on any happy morning to wake up their 12-year-old little girl. Sweetheart, it's time to wake up. And she did. And he says to this woman, daughter, your faith has healed you. And it had. Look again at this power of Jesus. Last week we saw a power that has authority over nature. Today we see someone who has power over the ultimate enemy of the human race. And that is death itself. And Jesus is able to take this little girl by the hand and say to her, sweetheart, it's time to get up, and pull her through death as easily as a parent would pull her from her slumber and wake her up in the morning. That's the incredible power of Jesus Christ, who on Easter Sunday established for all that he has power over death when he rose from death, and he promised that one day he will return and he will come to you in the grave of those you love and take you by the hand and say, Talitha, koum, sweetheart, wake up and be resurrected to eternal life. We see the incredible power of Jesus coupled with the incredible tenderness of Jesus who loves you that much. Here's your homework that I want you to think about going home today. First question is this: where am I trying to hurry Jesus? Where does he seem late? Where have you been waiting and waiting, and there's nothing else you can do, and you're waiting, and if God cared, he should be showing up, but he's not showing up. Where are you trying to hurry Jesus? And considering the power and the love of Jesus, considering the power and the love of Jesus, why do I want to hurry him? That's it. Where are you trying to hurry Jesus? And considering his power and considering his love, why would I want to hurry him? Friends, listen. When you're a little kid and you're holding your parent's hand, you think everything's going to be all right. You're wrong, of course, because even the best parents are imperfect, and even the best parents can lose track of their kids, and things can happen. But when you're holding your child's hand or you're holding your parent's hand, everything feels like it's going to be all right. On the cross, Jesus lost the hand of his heavenly Father as he suffered God's wrath for your sins and for my sins, in order that we could forever take his hand and be united with him. So, take Jesus by the hand and let him do whatever he's going to do. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you that you have preserved for us this incredible story from the life of Jesus. Thank you because it hits us right where we're at today. Because we still feel like you're late. We still feel like you don't show up and do what you should do when you should do it. But we're so thankful, Jesus, that here we see your incredible power over all of our things that concern us. We even see your power over death, and we see your tenderness and love for us. I ask for every man and woman, teenager who's listening today, that whatever they are wading through, wherever they are ready to give up hope, that this message will encourage them to just hold on to your hand, Jesus, because your timing is not our timing. Give us wisdom and insight to see if you are asking us to give more than we thought we would have to give. Give us eyes that can see what you are planning to give us, because you give us things that are so much bigger than we planned on receiving. And I ask that whatever seasons of waiting we walk through, Jesus, we will know that you have us by the hand, and your power and your love are enough to sustain us. May we find our contentment and peace in you. I pray all of this in your name, Jesus. Amen.